In the race for the White House, the Republican Party is set to hold another primary on Saturday. And the question is not so much whether Donald Trump will win, but will Nikki Haley stay in the contest? Hi, everyone. I'm Sean Caleb, sitting in for Anand Naidu, and you're watching The Heat. Big program for you today. The first Republican primary in the U.S. kicks off on Saturday, the U.S. South, I should say, with former President Donald Trump looking strong ahead of his only remaining rival, the former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, who was also a past governor of South Carolina. And she has been warning the nation against the chaos of Trump at campaign events and saying she's a better presidential candidate than two, quote, grumpy old men. But even in her home state, that doesn't look as though it's going to be enough to secure a win, as Caroline Malone reports from Charleston.
Well, anticipation is building here in South Carolina ahead of Saturday's Republican Party primary election. The two main contenders, Donald Trump and Nikki Haley, have been campaigning in events across the state. Here in Charleston, we've had Donald Trump Jr. speaking to crowds. He, of course, is the son of the former president. He's been speaking about how Trump is the right man to lead the country again, how he is a strong leader that can really support the United States, particularly on a global level, how he'll fix the border issues, crack down on immigration, and also build on a strong economy. And those do seem to be the issues that voters are engaged with. Of those people that I've spoken to, they're certainly concerned about immigration and about jobs and the economy. But Nikki Haley's also been speaking to crowds about much the same thing. She's been saying her track record when she was South Carolina governor shows that she can help to build the economy, that she can help to build jobs as well. She's also spoken in campaign videos as well about the chaos surrounding Donald Trump and how that's not going to be good for the country, and about how the chaos of the current President Biden will not be replaced, cannot be replaced by the chaos of Donald Trump. She says she's the right person because she doesn't bring this level of chaos with her and she wouldn't, to the White House. So it's all for fighting for, and the challenge is big for Nikki Haley against Donald Trump. Current polls show that she's about 30 points behind the former president. However, if she was to make it through a matchup with current President Biden, she actually might win, according to some polls. So everything to play for here in South Carolina. Caroline Malone for CGTN in Charleston, South Carolina.
Okay, let's pick up there. A lot to discuss. Let's bring in our panel here in Washington, D.C., Eleanor Clift. She's a political columnist for the Daily Beast. Meanwhile, from Florida, Eric Bolling is the host of Eric Bolling on The Balance on Newsmax. Gerald Griggs, an attorney and president of the NAACP in Georgia, joining us from Atlanta, and also from Georgia Indicator, Bill Crane is a political analyst and columnist. I want to welcome you all. Eric, I want to begin with you. If we can take polling and build on that. If we look at it, Donald Trump is going to walk away with a very clear victory, perhaps as much as 30 points. Okay, so the big question, is the race over? Or do you think there's a possibility that we could see some kind of surprise at the end of the night on Saturday?
No surprises, Sean. Good to be with you guys. Good to be back with you guys. No surprises. The only surprise will be if he only wins by 30. It likely will be more. I used to live in South Carolina. Nikki Haley was a popular governor, but she lost a lot of that luster. Look, no one's ever won New Hampshire, Iowa, and South Carolina. Trump's going to be a shoo-in in South Carolina. No one's ever won those and not gone on to be the GOP nominee. He's going to be the nominee. There's literally nothing that can stop him, including the lawfare that the left wants to use the court system and the prosecutors to try and throw him in jail prior. That won't stop him either. This is a Trump versus Biden, it looks like right now. I think the Democrats are crazy to run Biden, but it looks like that's what they want to do. And the question is, who comes out? Who hits the independents? And I will tell you, I think what's going on in the legal system, in the courts in Georgia, in New York, in the federal system in D.C., is creating a lot of independent voters for Trump, believe it or not. They can't, a lot of people don't like Trump, but they can't stand for a situation where a party can remove an opponent or someone they don't like
Well,
simply
now
because they want to.
we'll get to that in just a bit. I think a lot of people are
Sure.
going to say that you're overstating that. And I think some people say, look, it's 81 versus 91, an 81-year-old man versus 91 indictments. And Eric, I've had the chance to ask you this a couple of times on the program, and twice you've told me in your lifetime a Republican will not be elected president of the United States. Third time.
Sean, let me clarify. I didn't say that.
Ooh.
I said there will not be another Republican in my lifetime, meaning Donald Trump will be the only Republican in all of our lifetimes. As a Republican, the country's going far left in a fast way. Trump will be the last one if it was 2016 to 2020, or whether it's 24 to 28. He'll be the last Republican.
Okay. Moving on, Bill, let's talk about what Haley could do if indeed the numbers are right. She says that she's going to stay in despite what happens. Okay, now if she gets thrashed in her home state of South Carolina, then what happens? Do her donors continue to jump ship? What is the long-term outlet for the former UN ambassador?
All the polls show Donald Trump leading, but the margins are significantly different. There are some polls that put him over her by 50. There are some polls that put her over the former president, or the former president over the former governor by about 28 points. What's difficult to do in a state like South Carolina, which was critical for Joe Biden in 2020 and turned around his campaign, the Democratic primary, which preceded the Republican primary, had 4% voter turnout. 131,000 votes were cast. It's an open primary state. And a lot of those Democrats, which are going to be hard to poll in a Republican primary, are going to show up tomorrow as well as independents and vote for Nikki Haley. I believe she'll hang in at least through Tuesday, March 5th, which is Super Tuesday, when another 19 states and 21 states and protectorates and territories will vote for their nominee for president. At that point in time, there'll be enough delegates decided to more or less close out the contest. But to the question of why Nikki Haley is still hanging in there, it's the 91 that you spoke of a moment ago. It's the now $500 million in financial judgments against Donald Trump and his families and businesses. It's pending criminal trials in states that a president of the United States cannot pardon or waive. And yes, he can run if charged. Yes, he can run if awaiting trial. But if convicted, a large number of voters in the polls aren't certain they stay with him, which makes it much more competitive for Joe Biden, who is arguably a very weak nominee and a very weak incumbent.
Yeah, indeed. Gerald, let's pick up on that. Now, if Haley drops out of the race, and again, it's good to see you, my friend, does this really give Donald Trump just a grip on the nomination, a grip on the party that he's had since arguably 2016, and especially moving into southern states like South Carolina and your home state of Georgia?
Yeah, so I think that if she does not do well in our neighboring state in South Carolina, the race will officially be over. And I think we will shift into a full general election between the former president, Donald Trump, and the current president, Joe Biden. But I do disagree with a couple of your previous guests. The case in the state of Georgia is brought by the state of Georgia. It's not brought by Democrats. Right. And it's a very strong case. And I think the biggest date that he needs to be concerned about is March the 1st. When Judge McAfee will be making a decision on the disqualification of the district attorney. If he's not successful in the disqualification of the district attorney, he needs to be more worried about a Georgia courtroom than running. But I do think that, South Carolina will be the deciding factor, as it has been in the last couple of presidential elections, for the decision on who will be the nominee from either party. But I think that this particular race on the Republican side is already over. Okay,
Gerald, I've had a chance to talk with you several times, and one thing you told me recently is Joe Biden, candidate Joe Biden, made a lot of promises to African-American voters. Police reform, student loan forgiveness. It didn't happen. And there's certainly lingering frustration, disappointment among black voters. And you voiced the possibility of black voters sitting on the sidelines this time. Is that going to happen, and what would that mean?
Yes, I think both candidates are running a strong race against the couch. And I think that neither one of them have given real voice to the issues in the African-American community. As you said, President Biden made 3 promises to African-American voters. He promised a George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. He promised the John Lewis Voting Advancement Act, and he promised to cancel student loan debt. Now, the verdict is still out on canceling student loan debt, but those other 2 things he has not promised. And we see an attack on voting rights across the South by the right. And then, of course, the only message the right has is that we need to buy tennis shoes. So I think that African Americans are looking at both parties and saying, what are you going to do for the African American vote? And let's be clear, African Americans have delivered the last 3 presidents, 2 by voting and 1 by not voting. And so I think that at this point, when you go into a general election, you better talk to African Americans, particularly African Americans in the South, because they're going to make a determination on who wins the White House. And so I think that neither candidate is doing a very good job of that. They're not speaking to the needs, the kitchen table needs of African Americans and other people of color. And I think that Nikki Haley has had the hardest time in addressing the issues of systemic racism in this country by saying this is not a racist country, nor has it ever been. So I think both parties have serious issues with connecting with African American voters, and I do see that both candidates are running against the couch.
Eleanor, I think if you and I were sitting down having coffee, talking about how we got to this point, we'd probably start the conversation of like, wow, look where we are. You have a very rich history of covering presidential campaigns. We haven't seen anything like this. The fact that it could be over on Saturday. What do you make of this from an historic standpoint?
Well, it's unfinished business from the election of 4 years ago, and the same candidates, and you have a lot of challenges that have arisen for each of these candidates. Yes, we have never seen this before, but there are some things that remain true. And I think the hold that Donald Trump has on the Republican Party is not going to be shaken by Nikki Haley, but there are reasons why she is staying in the race, and it's because of the 91 felony counts against him. And she says it's because of his age and that he's not fit for the presidency. I would call it the buyer's remorse rationale. And that is when the Republicans get to Milwaukee for the convention in July, if the polls show that Trump is losing ground, which they don't indicate now, and if he is looking like he could be convicted on any of these counts, if his health is questioned, I think Nikki Haley thinks that if she keeps running, and there are people willing to give her money, I think, which is unusual. Usually people run out of money before this if they're not winning. But she can raise the money, and she can continue to make the case. And she thinks that then the convention might turn to her and nominate her. It was the same rationale that Chris Christie, the former governor of New Jersey, had when he was in the race. He didn't do well in New Hampshire, but he said he thought that he would stay until the convention. He's dropped out. But you look at the people who are going to the convention, they're all Trump people. The Republican National Committee has made sure of that. And Donald Trump is a lot more organized this time than he was 4 or 8 years ago. And there's no way those convention delegates, even if Donald Trump should be forced to drop out for whatever reason, they're not going to nominate Nikki Haley. They see her as somewhat of a traitor for not signing on with Trump once she lost a primary or 2. So I don't see the candidates changing. And as for Democrats, they should just suck it up and be happy with the president they've got, who's delivered on many counts.
Right, but
trust me, the African American community is not going to get a better deal from Donald Trump, and we just need more Democrats to make some of Biden's promises come true.
Let's pick up on what Haley said, candidate Haley said on the campaign trail. Don't blink. This is a very short soundbite, but listen.
Mm-hmm. And can't we do better than 2 80-year-old candidates running for president?
You know, to people across the country, it's a very fair question. Either one who's going to be elected is going to set a new record, for lack of a better term, for age. So
it's a lot of fun to talk about age now, and we can do that for some time. But this is going to be a choice. It's going to be a choice on climate change. It's going to be a choice about Russia. It's going to be a choice about whether you want to support Ukraine. There's a lot of other issues that are going to get some airtime other than age. And the age difference is not that big between the two of them. And frankly, some of the younger people stepping up, they don't look so great to me either. So
I've heard that. I've actually heard that.
It's about more than age.
Okay. Gerald, Biden is practically running the primary by himself. Now, he is going to be the candidate for the Democratic Party, barring anything really unusual. But on Tuesday, the swing state of Michigan is going to hold its primaries, and Biden may not do well because of the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, Israel and Gaza, and Muslim voters in that area. What do you make about this, and what are you hearing from your colleagues?
Yes, there's a lot of concern within communities of color, particularly, Black communities and Muslim communities, about the situation that's happening in the Middle East and the administration's handling of it. And I think that's going to be a big issue in states like Michigan, where you have a large Muslim population who are very dissatisfied with the handling of what's happening in the Middle East conflict. So I think that, Democrats need to come home to their core messaging. And the core messaging is not about Ukraine. It's not about anything other than issues that affect the constituency that put him in office. And so I understand that he's trying to build a broad coalition, but a broad coalition did not elect him. And I think he needs to return to those particular values. I think he needs to focus on the coalition that got him to Washington, the promises that got him to Washington, addressing the issues that got him to Washington. And so I think Michigan is a bellwether state where that coalition is fracturing, and it's fracturing because policies that were antithetical to what he ran on.
Right. Eric, if you look at the latest Gallup poll, Biden's approval rate right now is at 38%. That's not very good, and especially for an incumbent at this time. What about his low approval rating? And let's talk about immigration, talk about the situation in Ukraine and Israel. Clearly, those are feeding those numbers. Biden is touting the economy, but he hasn't been able to build on that. Why?
So very quickly, Eleanor is right. Nikki Haley will stay in, but she's not being supported by conservatives or Republicans. She's being supported by Democratic donors. We know that. We see some of the big names. And as to Gerald's point that African Americans have delivered presidents in the past, well, Trump polling around 25% in the African American community would deliver the presidency to him, as well as the 50+% he's polling in the Hispanic community. Get to your point, Sean. Here's the problem: the Democrats are stuck. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place because they want to get to the narrative the narrative that they win, and that's abortion. But they can't get to it because we're being inundated with video and pictures and stories about cops being beat up in Times Square, people being killed, being run over by illegal immigrants who are here illegally and were being supported in our major Democrat cities. That narrative hits home to American people. That narrative hits home to African Americans in Chicago who are saying, you're spending billions of dollars of our tax dollars housing illegal immigrants, and enough is enough. So the Republicans and Trump are right by keeping that stuff on the front page, and it's doing no favors to the Democrats with this constant crime wave happening from that community. So Trump's in a really good place. Now, if things change, you can get back on message as a Democrat and say, look, Trump's against abortion and women's rights. Then maybe you have something there. But as for now, it doesn't look like that's going to fix before November.
And Eric, what about using Trump's words against him? Now he says it was just a big joke, but he did say that he would be dictator for a day. And I think a lot of people across the United States didn't think it was a joke. Eric?
Oh, yeah. Well, so, he said that. And he also said, I would look the other way if Putin goes after a NATO country. Now, people freak out and the left freaks out, but that's a dog whistle. It makes everyone on the left go, oh, my God, can you believe the guy wants to be a dictator? The reality is, under Trump, and go ahead, any of you want to prove me wrong, under Trump, we didn't have a global conflict like Russia invading Ukraine, and we don't have China saber rattling like they may go into Taiwan, and we didn't have 1,400 Jews slaughtered by Hamas in the Middle East, and now Biden can't figure out if he's pro-Hamas or against Hamas. It's literally, you may not like the rhetoric, but it is, that's what it is. It's heightened rhetoric, but the reality is it's been a safer planet under President Trump because, frankly, leaders, dictators didn't know what to expect from him. And for me, that's a win.
I think Gerald's trying to say something.
I said we didn't have Charlottesville in this country. We didn't have North Korea firing missiles during his presidency. I mean, it was not a safer place. Now, we do have armed issues happening around the globe.
Hang on, Eric. Eric, just let him finish, please. Okay, go ahead.
The homeland was more dangerous under Trump. We had the biggest threat to our All right, Homeland Security was homegrown white nationalists who were marching all over the country. So I kind of pushed back on it was a safer place. It was not a safer place for minorities, and it's still not a safe place.
Gerald, you're going to say the world was a safer place under Biden when 1,400 Jews get slaughtered, now 15, 20,000 people from Gaza are being killed. There's 500,000 deaths in Ukraine. That's a safer place because there was an incident where some people died. It was terrible what happened in Charlottesville. I agree with you. But you can't take one instance and say the world was more violent under Trump than it is now. That's insanity.
Okay, let's
Bill, we're focused on America. We're focused on American politics, and it was much more dangerous. We had 3 armed vigilantes kill somebody in Georgia that we are grappling with. So I can push back in this country.
Okay, good point there. Bill, I want you to pick up on this because Biden has really tried to come across as a much tougher president recently. If you look at the sanctions that he slapped on Putin today, is this going to work?
No. And Joe Biden, let's just look at his foreign policy record. We were withdrawing from Afghanistan and Iraq. He left our troops bare. He left U.S. citizens unable to get out of a commercial airport. He left weaponry that our enemies now hold. He's mishandled the situation in Israel, though we should support our one of our strongest allies. And Ukrainian policy should be more than just an open checkbook. But in all those fronts, the U.S. needs to hold a position because you can't let Vladimir Putin run wild any more than Donald Trump understood he couldn't let North Korea do anything it wanted to do without at least engaging. But most of Joe Biden's engagement overseas, that he promised to be this great expert because he'd served in the U.S. Senate and the Senate Intelligence and Armed Services Committee for 30 years, has not panned out. And to Nikki Haley's point about both of them, I'm not an ageist, I'm 63.
Right.
But I know at 63, I'm not as sharp as I was at 50. And you can't watch Joe Biden make a public pronouncement, even with the benefit of a teleprompter, and not have some concerns about his cognition. And so those things are playing out in real time. Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee is a possibility if Joe Biden has to withdraw by the convention or after the convention. Donald Trump being convicted and the GOP having to go in another direction, whether it's one of the others in the field or Nikki Haley, is a very real possibility. And that's the part of this election cycle that I think we as the media are doing the voters a disservice.
Right.
Because all we want to talk about is the rematch and the polling, not the issues and not drill down. And that does point to a rematch that 82% of the American voters don't want.
Eleanor, let's talk about some of the issues, because recently the state of Alabama made its controversial ruling that frozen embryos created through fertility treatment are children, and IVF clinics have already stopped or paused working. Can the Democrats build on that?
That has been a long-sought goal for the anti-abortion movement, to declare personhood for embryos and fetuses. And now it's reached the courts, and the Republicans have to own this issue. They're very uncomfortable about it, but it is the inevitable result of what has come out of the overturning of Roe. So I think it's an issue that's clearly in the Democrats' favor. But this is, in the end, going to be a contrast. President Biden, like most presidents, could not survive a referendum simply on his leadership, even though he has passed more legislation, bipartisan legislation, than any president since Lyndon Johnson and FDR. He has considerable accomplishments. On immigration, that issue tends to favor the Republicans, but 21 Republican senators joined with Democrats for a strong immigration reform proposal, and the Republicans refused to bring it to the floor for a vote in the House, where it would pass, because Donald Trump said outright, bluntly, that he didn't want it to pass because it would help Joe Biden in the election. I mean, to me, that is so unpatriotic, it's disgusting. And what Trump is doing on immigration, he said it's going to be his main issue. He's scoping out sites for mass deportation camps. He said it's going to be the biggest mass deportation this country has ever seen.
Right.
He's going to deny government benefits to the children of undocumented citizens, not citizens, I guess, undocumented migrants.
Right.
And he is talking about requiring loyalty oaths for anybody who works for the government. I mean, this is not, to me, what a democracy is about. So these are the contrasts that are going to be drawn. And one is 77, one is 81. If for any reason either of them drops out, there are plenty of people ready to step into their shoes. We have processes in this country. So, but it's two forms of government facing off against each other, one authoritarian and one a democratic, with all the imperfections of a democratic system where not everybody gets what they want.
Okay, I think we've just lost you. Eric, I saw you about ready to jump out of your shoes during that answer. So let me, we only have a short bit of time here, but let me hear your response to that.
So I just very quickly, I think the Republicans are wrong about their stance on abortion. I would agree with those. But look, everyone understands this crime wave that's sweeping the country. You can't deny it. You see it in every single major city that's housing hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of migrants. It's a no-win. Joe Biden left that border open for 3 years. As far as Eleanor, I almost jumped out of my skin. Yeah, the Senate sent one package over to the House, which codified 2 million illegals per year, allowing them in before they shut the border. 2 million. And the second one had no funding for the U.S. border, had $60 billion for Ukraine, $14 billion for Israel, and $9 billion for the people who are supporting Hamas in Palestine. It is insane. There's no way that would pass the House anyway. They knew it.
Gerald, we have about 45 seconds left, and I really want to kind of get the last word from you. I want to see where you think American politics are heading and how you see this election in 2024 playing out. Who's going to be sworn in January of 2025?
I'm not sure. Again, it's a campaign against the couch. And, people in the minority communities are listening to this conversation and thinking to themselves, how does this affect us? And, we really need to drill down on the issues that are happening in this country. I live in one of those cities where we don't see a migrant crisis in Atlanta. We don't see it anywhere in the South. And so what we're saying is for 3 years, we've supported an administration on promises. We've heard from the other side, no promises. And so there's a campaign against the couch, and whoever beats the couch will be the next president of the United States. But my main concern is what happens on March the 1st when we address what happened in 2020 with an attempt to subvert our election. If the couch wins or conviction wins, that will determine who the president is.
Yeah, I'm sorry we didn't get to January 6th earlier, but I got to wrap it up there. I want to really thank our panel for all this, your patience and your very thoughtful answers. I certainly appreciate it. And that does it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Sean Caleb's here in Washington, D.C. And as always, thanks for being with us.